Well, hello, Wear Many Hats listeners. Here we are, another fantastic episode of the podcast. Absolutely delighted today to be joined by a gentleman called Mark Bell. Mark Bell is the Head of Global Workplace Experience at Unit 4. Hello, Mark. How you doing?
Very good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm always very pleased when somebody's got a name I know that I can't forget or get
We
wrong.
can't miss this up, can we?
To be fair. Anyway, where have you come from today, Mark?
We're actually based in Warwick Street, so short hop on the tube for me to get here. So
Yeah, nice, quick route round.
exactly, 3 stops, quicker than I hoped. So
Yeah. What line did you come in on?
Piccadilly.
Piccadilly.
Okay.
Now that's a word I like saying.
Yeah.
Piccadilly. Sounds good, doesn't it? Brilliant. Okay, well, listen, let's crack straight on, Mark. Look, you've had an incredibly interesting career. So tell us where you started, right through to where you are now.
God, how long have we got? I started my facilities management journey at P&O, so
Yeah.
known for the ferry and cruise
Yes.
ships.
Yeah.
But I was actually started as an office junior at P&O Developments, where
Right.
they actually built shopping centres and hotels, and
Oh,
they owned a lot
really?
of property. Yeah, so I was the young guy in the office making cups of tea and folding the big AO drawings into A4 sheets of paper for the
Yeah.
property developers,
Yeah.
and kind of just really sat there and absorbed it like a sponge, listening in on all the project calls.
Was that straight from school then?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
I had a brief gap. I started off as a printer's apprentice,
Right.
and very quickly realised that working on the factory floor wasn't for me.
Yeah.
So went and got a job in an office as an office junior to see
Yeah.
if an office environment was better than a factory one.
Yeah.
And like I say, really stumbled into the property development side of it.
Right.
And then from there, went from office junior to facilities assistant to
Yeah.
facilities manager, and ended up leaving P&O to go into the advertising space and really sort of open my eyes to kind of fun environments to work in. Offices don't have to be these boring places where people
Yeah.
come in suits and ties. It's more of a vibrant atmosphere. So opened my eyes to that side, and then from there went into kind of the tech space.
Yeah.
So made redundant, unfortunately, in 2008, like a lot of people were. At
Yeah, I remember.
the
Yeah.
Lehman Brothers crash.
Yeah.
The advertising agency I was working for was biggest client was Royal Bank of Scotland.
No. Yeah.
Yeah, they were big contributors to the crash there. So
Of course.
they went, but interestingly as well, they had a Halifax under that. So Howard,
Yeah.
the singing bank manager,
Yeah.
he was regularly got that guy's coffee. So
Oh, really?
that's my claim to fame. I know Howard from
Yeah,
Halifax
really?
singing
Are
ads.
you the reason he did that advert where he was sat on a goose flying through the...
Yeah, that, well, not me personally, but that agency, yes, I was there at that time.
Yeah, the
But,
singing one, I remember that one. That,
Yeah.
that was probably one of the better ones, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So from there, made redundant, unfortunately. Then temp to the BBC, which is great experience whilst I was there at the White City.
Yeah.
And then into a corporate career at Experian. So looked
Yes.
after their UK property. Then first opportunity whilst Experian to sample EMEA, so Europe, Middle East, and Africa. So got some international experience under my belt there.
Yeah. How did you find that transition from UK based to international? Because I imagine, was that difficult in terms of the
huge.
different working practices? Or
What I took for granted was the cultural nuances country to country.
Right.
And lucky enough at the time, I had a really good mentor there, Experience, so I wasn't sort of thrust into to do it. I was kind of a junior working in the European team, and then very quickly those guys retired and I was
Yeah.
left holding the baby there. So I grew up a lot
Yeah.
in my time at Experian, learning about European ways of doing things.
Yeah.
And not every deal is the same. You have to work differently with different landlords in different countries. So it was a real eye-opening experience there.
yeah.
And then at that time, I had my first child. So traveling an awful lot for Experian. We had 46 sites across
Wow.
Middle East and Europe, Middle East and Africa. So living out of a suitcase there. So looked for a role in the UK.
Yeah.
And at the time, this was approached by a young startup called Facebook at the time, which is now called Meta. So took a chance on.
That's an interesting, a young start.
Yeah, when I joined them there, they were 150 people in the UK only.
Wow. Was that over at the King's Cross estate then, or were they somewhere else?
No, there was at the time there was in Endell Street
Okay.
in Covent Garden. So
Yeah.
150 people there a little office above Urban Outfitters in Endell Street. That's humble beginnings where Facebook grew, and then there for about 3 years. And in that time, they grew from 150 to 3,000 employees in the UK alone. Wow. We're in about 4 square miles between King's Cross and Rathbone Place and Tottenham Court Road. Rapid growth in the amount of time we was opening offices. Almost felt like bi-weekly. Fast-paced projects, huge budgets. So when they you hear that, I hate the term rocket ship in the recruitment industry, but that really was. It was like hold on to the sides as you're building the rocket, because it was every day a different challenge to solve. So really interesting experience.
So were you involved when they moved from that original location to the King's Cross estate?
No, so the King's Cross estate come after I left. So I see the transition from Endell Street in Covent Garden. They took a large space in Warren Street.
Right.
And then from Warren Street, they took the building next door. And then from the building next door, they took the entire site at Rathbone Place.
Wow.
Which was delayed in construction. So they took the entire building from the office group in Stephen Street. And then, like I say, we was literally bolting on real estate. We had over 1 million square feet within 5 minutes walk of each other. So
that must have been crazy.
Yeah, I used to get between sites on the scooters that used to go between the offices. Yeah, so it was a fun time and great experience. But like literally rapid growth that I've never seen before.
Did you ever meet Mr. Zuckerberg then?
Yeah, I mean, very open company, and had the opportunity to go and see their headquarters in Menlo Park. So great experiences there at Facebook. But and saw Mark Zuckerberg at his desk. He doesn't have an office. He sits on the shop floor with everybody else.
Open plan,
Very approachable guy as well. Would like sit down and have lunch and speak to the team if he had time to have lunch in the canteens.
Cool.
But what he did do was completely unique. I've never seen anywhere else. Was every Friday would do a town hall style meeting where he would come and share what the leadership team at Facebook, or Meta as it's called now, was working on, and open the floor to questions. So anybody from senior leadership to interns could ask Mark Zuckerberg a question live and uninterrupted. So
that is interesting.
Complete and utter. They run the company there like it was a startup, even though it grew to tens of thousands of people very quickly. Try to keep everybody as accessible and approachable as possible. But it was a really interesting place to be.
Yeah, it sounds it. Yeah.
Highly demanding though from a service point. The engineering teams there were hard to corral. They're kind of interesting folks, like skateboarding down the stairs and not really understanding why you can't hang things off the sprinkler systems. So I kind of felt like the dad of the office trying to say, we like to enjoy work, but there is some rules that you have to abide to. So
like that film with Vince Vaughn and
it's not far from the truth. Honestly, it's not far from the truth. The stuff that they get away with is unbelievable.
Oh, brilliant. So from Facebook you moved on to...
So from Facebook, UK only responsibility, then I was approached by an ex-colleague of mine at Experian, who was the lead for Adobe across EMEA.
Yep.
They'd seen the kind of offices that Facebook and Google were creating and wanted somebody to put Adobe on the map, is how they described it to me when it came to office or workspace. So I was approached there to come and lead their workplace or facilities team across EMEA and get me back into a European market.
Right. Was that to get away from the kids then, Mark?
Yeah, by then I had 2. So I was
You're like, right, that's it, I'm off.
I was keen to get back on the road. But no, for me it was a great opportunity. I knew and worked with the people, but another tech giant, everybody knows the name Adobe.
Yeah, very much so.
But nobody knew kind of what their workplace identity or office identity was.
Yeah.
And it felt like a great opportunity to kind of really leave my stamp on a very well-known company. So we kind of took over that portfolio. They had around 30 offices across EMEA and very quickly started to kind of build a workplace culture. They didn't have one. They had a fantastic company culture, but when it comes to office space, they were kind of stuck in the 80s or 90s sort of cubicle desks and didn't really understand what the dynamic of a workplace could bring to a company and kind of get out there ahead of attracting talent, retaining the best people in a tech space. So
Yeah.
it felt like the experience that I got from Facebook helped that transition into Adobe, and was the appeal factor for me moving across for them. So
yeah, do you know what's really interesting? One of the things that we talk about a lot on the podcast with guests and things like that is that the way that the market and the office environment has changed over the last 5 to 10 years. And one of the things that we always end up discussing is the tech giants, and how the tech giants fundamentally changed how an office
absolutely
would be perceived, and how getting people into a work environment is so crucial. It's really interesting, considering we talked about it a lot, to have you on the show, because you've effectively been you were a significant player within that structure. So I guess what I'm saying is, you helped create the way that the environment is now being developed across London and the world, which sounds, I don't know, I'm putting a lot of things on your shoulders here. But
me personally done
not,
it, yeah.
Not you, but you were part of that drive, weren't you?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I would say that there was a pressure within. At my time at Facebook, we knew that as well. There was a healthy rivalry, I'd say, between us and Google on who created the more creative workspaces.
Mm.
And I actually remember when we moved from Covent Garden into our new office in Warren Street during my time at Facebook, we had the recruitment company sent me an email to kind of say there was a particular candidate that everybody in the market was interested in. There was a sort of unicorn engineer that's coming fresh out. So fresh out of university, they had their pick of any of the tech giants, and they chose us based on the work environment.
Right.
We framed the email and put it up in our area, and I kind of said, this is why we do what we do, because this is a direct impact that we're having on the team. People are choosing to work here because they want to work in the environment that we've created them. So it was that previously, before, the facilities team were stuck in you talk to air conditioning engineers and be in the boiler room, not the boardroom. Whereas now it's like, what can the office do to appeal to the next generation of engineers? What's the differential that we have over them? So Google would have fantastic offices and market leading for sure, but they would be more in your face with some of the stuff. So they'll have the slides down instead of staircases, and they'll have fireman's poles, and they'll have a big T-Rex in a London bus in London. Facebook was more the best high-tech gaming rooms you can have, or rock climbing walls, or sweet shops and coffee bars in the office. So where it was around, we wouldn't put stuff in just for the sake of doing it. It had to add some value to the day of the employees. And a lot of what we'd done there was employee-led. We would have focus groups with the teams and let them tell us what they need to be successful, and then co-create it with them. We done stuff like hackathons, which we called, which was like we'd have blank walls. Every department could go and do the artwork in their space, and we had this sort of unwritten rule. If it wasn't that good, I would put some red tape on it, and it would be painted white by Monday. If it was great, fantastic, we'll leave it there, and it'll be part of the furniture. And then we found then that if you had some connection back to the workspace, you were so proud of it. You would bring your friends and family in and say, this is the artwork that I done. Me and my friends done this over here. It was tying the employees into the workspace and really have them buy into it. Our jobs were half done. We just had to maintain it and keep it going, because they were the passion around it. We didn't have to do the tours. They were doing it for us. So it was kind of that, it really did change the way that companies thought about workplace. And now you see banks and everybody doing sort of this big open plan, co-working style working. It all come from those early iterations of big tech.
Well, outside of technology, because I was literally just thought about it, but outside of technology, that's the biggest change in a workplace environment in over 100 years.
Oh, absolutely.
Easily. Yeah. And to be fair, that's actually quite, when you actually think about it, that's really significant. 100 years is a long time. 2 generations. Or was it 3? Let's go for 2. Okay, brilliant. Thanks. Okay, so obviously, you know, you were at Adobe, and sorry for interrupting you. That's my fault. And you moved on from Adobe to
I moved on to Adobe to a startup called Utopia Music.
right.
They actually look at the royalty payments for artists and creators and
Right.
try and accelerate that. So it's quite a manual process. If anybody
Yeah.
knows much about the music industry, it could be months, even years sometimes, until you kind of get the royalties back from when the content
really?
was played on the radio or on television.
Right. Okay.
So this was accelerated in real time. It's kind of an industry that hasn't really caught up with technology. So Utopia trying to bridge that gap. But unfortunately, like most startups in the last few years, it didn't. The growth was huge. It went from sort of 40 people to 1,200.
Wow.
1,200 in the space of 2 years.
Whoa. Really?
And it was actually an ex-colleague of mine at Facebook that was the CEO at the time that asked me to come and help scale because he hadn't seen scale that fast since our time at Facebook together.
Yeah,
Needed somebody to kind of understand their property strategy and kind of help build the plane as it was taking off. Unfortunately, very quickly, the real estate stuff stopped. So it was a very amicable time to say, look, the reason why I was brought in isn't the reason why I'm here. And
of course,
let's agree to part ways here before it becomes any worse. So they're still operating as a company but they've had to downsize considerably, and the real estate growth isn't there for them. So sort of pivoted from Utopia Music to where I am now at Unit 4. So been there around 3 months and enjoying it so far. So
And what are you responsible for at Unit 4? Similar scenario?
Similar scenario. So head of global workplace. So look after their 29 locations across the globe. They're a privately owned company, so quite different. They don't have the cash reserves as they would do at the Adobes and Facebooks to go and do huge projects. It's more cost conscious.
Okay.
Which is also a good way to manage a property in this day and age as well, right? Everybody's looking for value add, considering offices are now not as frequently occupied as they once were. So how do we get to that point? So Unit 4 is quite an interesting scenario because they are a remote first company when it comes to workplace. So first place I've been where we actually embrace remote working and try and enhance that back to the employees. So we have key hubs. We have drop-in locations across the globe, but we really encourage remote working and try and offer as much as we can to give that work-life balance back to the employees. So quite unique approach to property.
Yeah, it certainly is. So are the locations that you've got around the world quite small then because of that approach? Or
Yeah, they vary in size. They're not as big as some of the big techs I've worked in, but they're a lot smaller as an organization, around 3,000 employees globally. The biggest office is in Wrocław in Poland. About 600 desks there. So fair size. After that, they kind of come down. Lisbon's probably our next biggest hub. Then Jakarta in Indonesia.
Oh, lovely.
So
you get to go there as well?
I will do, yes.
That's not bad, is it?
Sure, we have a lease event coming up 2025, so I'll probably be out there next year deciding what to do. Absolutely.
I'll be your mascot. I'll get the teas in.
It's a real variety of portfolio. So the business has been going for about 40 years, and like most companies of that age in the SaaS space, SaaS, for those that don't know, is software as a service. The portfolio has grown through acquisition. So every time they've acquired a company, it's come with a handful of properties in certain scenarios. So my job at the moment is kind of rationalizing the landscape that we've inherited over the years and understanding in this new way of working where we're pushing remote first, where we need key locations to continue in hiring our talented people out there, and where we can potentially downsize and go into a more space as a service model. If we're talking software as a service, why are we not thinking about space as a service and this kind of more transactional agreement when it comes to workplace? If we have big offices that are sitting empty for a period of time, is that the best value for our money? Do we look at space as a service? So that's something that I'm looking at for next year, but it's going to be an interesting journey here at Unit 4. Yeah,
so basically it's kind of the opposite to Facebook and Adobe. Rather than scaling up, you're scaling down.
Yeah, but I think it's scaling down
for the right reasons.
in a strategic way. It's not just cost cutting and closing the doors, and we're putting a lot of thought into what's the employee missing if we don't have that connection hub. So how do we make the remote working experience the best experience for us? So I think if we get it right, it could be a real game changer and a real marketing tool for our recruitment team out there. If you want to work somebody where flexibility is key and you decide where you work, when you work, the hours you do, it could be a really interesting space to be. So I kind of feel like every company preaches it, but I've not seen somebody do it that well. So Unit 4, I think, is on the way to really finding something unique here.
Very exciting then.
I'm excited by this one.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, cool. Listen, I can't wait to ask you this question because I've never had anybody from the tech space really here. So how do you think AI will impact facilities management? Come on, I'm looking forward to this.
AI feels like a bit of a dirty word at the moment. Everybody talks about it. It's, but I personally think it will be a good thing for facilities management. I'm not afraid of technology. I think we have to embrace it. And there's AI is already working and making positive impacts for business. So if you have a huge portfolio space and you're running your stuff through a BMS and you have people adjusting the temperature down based on occupancy and where there's hot spots and cold spots in the building, AI can do that without even thinking about it or seeing an operator do it. So I think that there'll be an ROI on that straight away. And I'm thinking huge places like you think of a Heathrow Terminal 5, millions of people going through it all day, every day. If you have AI connected to their heat mapping sensors and understand where the through traffic and things is, just adjusting temperature down will save millions over the years based on cold spots, hot spots in the airport terminals. You can deploy cleaning teams to where there's high traffic areas and distribute staff. I mean, it could be the biggest asset to FMs if used correctly. I don't think it's robots taking over the world and we're losing our jobs. I think if we harness it and use it in the correct way, we can be operating so much more efficiently. And then being able to produce this sort of level of data to executives or C-suites that we go in and meet and be a bit more credible in that area. I think that the data that we'll receive on the back end of it will be huge. But I personally use it now. I use ChatGPT.
So do I. I do. It's brilliant.
I remember I work internationally, so receive leases in different languages. I don't speak many different languages at all. It's a little Spanish. And I remember translating lease documents, holding my camera phone up, translating it loosely on Google Translate to understand when exit terms are. I can now upload a document into ChatGPT, have it translated within seconds, then have it translated into spoken English so it's not the direct and it enables me to move so much quicker. I don't have to worry about putting stuff into a lease extract team. This technology, and everybody has a smartphone now. It's in your pocket. You should be leveraging it. You can.
I didn't even know you could translate languages with it.
You can translate languages, and like I say, some of the lateral translations are quite interesting. So you can actually then take the actual translation and have it translated into spoken English, so that actually reads like you would say it.
Right.
So it's a phenomenal tool if harnessed the right way. So I kind of feel like it's a learn and iterate. Play with it, see what works for each business. There's no silver bullet when it comes to AI.
No.
But don't be afraid of it. Trial it. If it doesn't work, say it was a failed exercise, move on. Try something different. I think embrace it and see what comes. The more technology will evolve, the better it will become. So the earlier you start playing with it in your organization, the quicker you'll find the niche where it really makes sense for you to go and do. So if you have BMSs out there, already be using it. If you're like me, thumbing through foreign language documents, use the translation tools. It can be there it can write policies for you in seconds, and you can then proofread and adapt for your team. I mean, if it's giving you a head start, then take it.
Yeah, completely agree.
Yeah.
Well, one of our guests actually said that, you'd be interested to get your thoughts on this actually. One of our guests said that in relation to job losses and things like that as a direct result of AI, he felt that it would be very similar to other technology that's come into the workspace, whereby although there may well be job losses in one area, it also creates jobs in another.
Absolutely.
It transitions. So what happens is you have new industries that offshoot off it as a direct result of that new proprietary technology that's come into the workplace.
Absolutely. I already feel like that now. I feel the facilities assistants or those entry-level roles that I would hire 10 years ago, the job descriptions are completely different now.
Yeah.
You're looking at sort of more data analytics. And can you read occupancy data? Do you take badge reports and understand where the people are coming in, where your peaks and valleys are in your data? So no longer is it manage your PPM schedules and understand your periodic cleaning schedules. You have to do that as a table stakes now, as any FM.
Yeah.
But then there's this extra layer of data analytics and understanding more to do with that. So I feel that it will do that. And as technology evolves, I think, gosh, what's the if you ask a kid at school, they want to become an influencer or a YouTube blogger. This stuff didn't exist when I was at school. So it was...
I wanted to be a policeman.
Yeah, it was like I was going to say, you're a fireman, policeman or football player, right? Or an astronaut. That's kind of... But now it's, gamer, YouTuber, influencer. These are all roles that didn't exist when we were growing up. So
exactly,
God knows what the FM job description will look like in 10 years. I think with the enhancement of technology, we have to embrace it because it's coming whether people like it or not. There's no question about that.
Yeah, without a doubt. Really interesting to get your thoughts on that. Okay, so sort of moving on to another area. ESG, obviously we had a quick chat about it prior to recording the podcast, and you talked about some really interesting things that you're doing at Unit 4 with respect to that. Do you want to talk us through those things?
Yeah, so for us at Unit 4 and me, ESG for me and Unit 4 isn't just about environmental standards. There's a whole social element to it. So what are you doing in your community? D&I reporting comes under ESG. The whole umbrella of it needs to be considered. And for us at Unit 4, we're starting with small steps on what tangible data that we can present into the market now. So gender pay equity reporting, number of females in leadership roles, for example, metrics that we can actually hang our hat on and see hopefully year over year improvement in. But for me, it is more so about you need the leadership to buy into it. It's not a tick box exercise. I feel ESG will be on the table for at least the next 10 years because we have so much of a gap to close.
Yes.
But the next generations of leaders, I hope, now that there's so much more social awareness around what we're leaving behind for the next generation, you should see those marked improvements. But for us, it's actual building blocks that we can tangibly see change to. There's no point setting by 2030 we'll be here metrics. It's year over year, small improvement. How can we be accountable for what we're doing in our space? And for us, it has to be through the company. So we discussed before we started recording here that it should bleed through into the sense of if it's a bid for Unit 4 versus a competitor, we should have our salespeople knowing that those ESG credentials that we have should then be a differentiator. Do business with us because we're a much more socially aware business. Here's what we're doing in the environment space. Here's what we do when it comes to gender pay equality. It can be a real differentiator in the right hands. So it has to bleed through the organization, not just a handful of champions within the space. And that's, for us, that's kind of where we are. Right. And I see it in a lot of businesses. There's a handful of passionate people, but there isn't enough at the leadership level that then filters down into the managers, into the team on the ground. So I kind of feel like there's a lot to do in that space and something that I'm passionate about. I have young children, so I'm hoping now to start educating them to, in my grandchildren and grandchildren's time, we have actually a decent place to live when we're a bit older.
We won't know how to talk to them, Mark.
No.
We'll just sit on the couch with a newspaper. There'd be a different world, a different breed. Okay, brilliant. So what do you think the future landscape of, facilities management is going to look like?
It's a real, it's like the $1 million question.
Yeah.
Because right now I feel like the industry is at this tipping point where we're now coming out of a pandemic.
Yeah.
It kind of still feels we're slowly crawling out of it in times.
Yeah.
But we're at this real tipping point where it's the workplace or the facilities management industry is at this sort of evolve or die scenario. I feel if you don't change the way that you was operating pre-pandemic, your workplaces will slowly bleed out and people just won't be interested in coming back.
Yeah.
Right now, the biggest competitor to occupied offices are home working or flexible or hybrid. So how does your office earn the commute for the employee? And if you don't know the answer to that, you really need to start thinking about it now, because every day people make that decision on, do I get on the train? Do I have to deal with a commute?
Yeah.
Do I have to get dressed to come into the office today? Yeah. Can I just put my shorts and t-shirt on and join the Teams calls or Zooms?
Yeah.
So you have to start thinking about what's the value add the office brings and find that unique scenario. I always go back to this comment of, if I was ever working from home pre-pandemic, the first thing I would say if I was joining a call is, sorry, everybody, I'm working from home today because I've got a doctor's appointment in the afternoon, or I'm working from home today because the boiler man's coming around to service my boiler. There was this excuse to be at home, whereas now if I'm in the office, I say I'm in the office today because I've got the Many Hats podcast this afternoon, so I'm in London today.
Oh, thank you very much for coming in specifically for us. Really appreciate it.
But you now have to have this because to be in the office. So if we're not, as facilities managers and workplace professionals, working out what that because is, you're gonna slowly lose people. So you have to start thinking differently about what the value proposition of an office brings to the employee base, because the buildings are always going to be there, but if they're empty, the facilities management industry will die.
That is such an interesting insight. And you are 100% right. I haven't thought about it like that.
Yeah.
I think as well, the pandemic, just the shift, from before and then after is, I don't think that we totally recognize the scale of how that has changed the work life. And I don't, and in about 5 years' time, I think we'll all look back and go, wow.
I used to remind my team at the time when we was doing this that as scary as it was and concerned as people were that were property employees when all the offices were empty and people were forced to work from home, that in years to come, there'll be white papers about this period of time.
There will be.
What the decisions we make now, we are writing workplace history. What we do in this scenario, as scary as it is, we're privileged to be in this position to actually create the new workplace experience. So let's not underestimate the work we're doing here. It's all the perspex stuff we put on the screens, all of this hand sanitizers that we bought, all that stuff that we done as a response. It was like, these will be sort of emergency response plans in time to come. They will be, It was the biggest social experiment workplace is ever going to go through globally. Everybody was in the same boat. So I kind of, as crazy as it is, it's kind of like one of those career defining moments when you look back at your career, that period of time is going to be such a standout moment of, well, all the buildings are still here and people are slowly coming back in. So we survived it. But the hats off to every workplace professional out there that lived through the pandemic and come out with their COVID response plans and their come back to office plans. There was no playbook to look through, no history to look on this. So everybody that done it wrote a little bit of history into the workplace experience textbook. So
they did as well. And do you know something? Big shout out to all of those facilities professionals during the pandemic, because whilst everybody else was at home, they were at work.
Yeah.
They were there maintaining things and making sure that, the buildings were safe, the key workers that were going into the buildings had the facilities that they needed and so on, and I think that sometimes gets underplayed.
Yeah. And we're now at that, like I was touching on earlier, we're at that tipping point now where we're coming out of that now. So what do we do next is the big question. And if we're not thinking about, if we're kind of still in that middle ground, we need to very quickly start thinking about what's next, because like I say, if we don't change.
What do you think should be next? Do you have an opinion?
I think every company is different. So I don't think there
isn't a blanket approach.
Yeah, there's not a definitive answer to that one. So if you're in the retail space, you have to be in to open the doors for the customers. If you're in the tech space and you work off a laptop and just need Wi-Fi and video calls, you're more mobile than most. So I think every business is slightly different. But I think ultimately now, power shift's probably too strong of a term, but the employees have a life-work balance. And businesses have to respect that now. Before it was work-life balance, you was in the office on Monday because it's a Monday and that's expected, and that has been the way. Whereas now it's work fits in around the lifestyle of the employee. So depending on the demographic of your employee base, if your average age of employees is 26, they're going to want something very different to if your average age of employees is 46. So typically if you're 46, and massive generalization, but you'd typically be living outside the city, have a spare bedroom that you could work in, and your needs are very different. If you're in your early 20s, you're either still at home or in a flat share somewhere, and your work from home style is a lot worse. So they want the release of the office space or access to a co-working hub. So you really need to understand your demographic, understand the needs of the employee. But if you're expecting people back in Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, those days are gone. I don't think they're going to come back. So if you don't evolve and really get to know, like I say, the office has to earn the commute of the employees. So what is it that they need? You have to ask yourself that question and understand who your customers are. When you're running a workplace, you're hoping people come to your workplace. They're your customers. So understand what your customers need and fit it in around them. So it's quite a unique scenario. I think everybody just wants the freedom of choice and flexibility. So if you can provide that, then I think you'll be successful.
Yeah, do you know, I like how you turned around life-work.
Yeah.
Rather than work-life balance, it's now life-work. And that is so true.
No, it is.
Because I think we all still say now, I want a work-life balance. But the reality is the other way around.
Exactly really that. Work-life balance means you're putting work before the life or the family style atmosphere, whereas now it is a life-work balance. You take your kids to school before you do your calls. And you do the school run before you jump on a meeting. You don't no longer, you work around those pickup times. So it's quite an interesting dynamic, and those companies that understand it will be the pioneers, and I think everybody else would then play catch up once there's a cyclical moment.
So next, it's going to be an exciting 5 years, isn't it, Mark?
It is, yeah.
It'll be interesting to see how it plays out, to be honest. Okay, brilliant. That was great. Okay, so how do you, as a professional, how do you stay informed about new developments within the sector?
There's loads of noise out there, and I'm trying to be polite because
honesty is what we want, Mark.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of strong opinions. If you're looking at LinkedIn, where everybody has a soapbox, where there's this kind of constant, I like the post, but I spend more time reading the comments. Right?
I do as well, yeah.
So it's like you get this sort of unique approach to a workspace, and somebody telling people what is next and next big thing, and then I try and read the balance of that land or not land, but then even in the comments, everything is a individual response to it. I don't need this, or that doesn't speak to me, or everybody kind of doesn't think, does that speak to the company anymore?
Yeah.
It's kind of everybody, it still feels like everybody's in for themselves. So, but LinkedIn is a good one for me, but I tend to actually, I've got more grey hairs than I'd like. So I've been in the industry for a little while. So I have some very good friends that experience the same things as I. So we regularly meet just to talk about stuff, or if there's a challenge that I'm experiencing in my day-to-day work, I'll pick up the phone or send an email to one of my peers and say, have you experienced this before? What do you think? Can we just have half an hour call on Friday and let me bounce some ideas off you? I kind of get more out of that than reading white papers, because it tends to be from one of the big four property companies trying to say they've cracked it, and they're trying to sell you some service, and they do all their studies and they're quite tailored to the result that they want.
Right. So
it's kind of, you have to read in between the lines of what you're reading online.
So stacking the deck somewhat, would you say?
Yeah, definitely. So it kind of feels like, I would say for me, LinkedIn is a good spot. It's then I try to relate my real life challenges and day-to-day work issues that we're going through, and then pick and choose who I go to for advice for that. But it's so interesting. There's just a wealth of information out there, and you can drown in it. So I would say kind of cherry pick what it is that's relevant for you right now.
Yeah.
Seek that out. Read 2 or 3 different opinions on it. Don't take the first one. Because
well, it's same as when you get a plumber at home.
Exactly that. I kind of feel like that. There's now so many. I've never seen so many workplace experts.
Yes.
Kind of.
It's quite polarizing, isn't it?
The pandemic did just everybody then become interested all of a sudden. So it was quite interesting when the offices were occupied and people were going through the day-to-day motions. There was never so many posts about workplace experience and what people need in the office and what companies should be providing people. That stuff wasn't readily available. Now all of a sudden there's a tsunami of information out there. So
it's true. Yeah.
Kind of cherry pick what you need. Go there. But LinkedIn is a great place, but I would also really encourage everybody, find networking is a huge thing. Go and seek out like-minded individuals. Choose somebody that doesn't have the same opinion as you. It's great to have a debate and a discussion about something and get different opinions on it. It can make you see things in a different way. So, encourage that.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so what advice would you give to a young professional looking to start their career in the facilities management arena?
Use AI. No, just just kidding.
Fair enough.
I would say for me, and I'll just use my personal experience, having a mentor is invaluable.
Yep.
Somebody that can actually course correct and guide you throughout your career. I still speak to a guy called Chris Rosridge, worked for P&O. He's now retired. Yeah. Ex-paratrooper, quite tough as I was growing up and coming in slightly hungover sometimes. Sorry, Chris.
No, never.
But he was a strong hand, but very, very made me think about stuff. It wasn't just the impact on the building. What did it mean to the people that were using it? And every decision, some stuff he says to me still lives with me now. So sort of like every decision you make could make or break somebody's day. Turning up the air conditioning by 5 degrees is going to annoy everybody in the office.
Yeah.
Negotiating cost down on 10 pence on stationery contract isn't going to change the world. So don't invest all your time in these kind of areas. So like think about the decisions you're making and use your time best to impact the employees out there on the shop floor, as he would call it.
Yeah. And
it kind of really, way before his time, really, that sort of human-centric workplace type of scenario.
Yeah,
he was a great mentor for me, and I still reach out to him all the time just to check in. But I think, get yourself a good mentor in the industry, somebody that can kind of course correct and guide you and kind of give you those thoughts of knowledge that they've been through it, so they can kind of help you get there. And then I would say, don't be afraid of failing.
Yeah.
Like, try stuff. Like, it's okay to apologize for if the intention was good to set something up and try a different way of working or adjusting something to hopefully get a better result. If it doesn't work, put your hands up and say, okay, it's fine.
Yeah.
We'll put it back to the way it was, or we'll try something new. It's don't be afraid to fail. The worst thing you can do is not try to evolve. If you keep everything the same, then it'll just be status quo forever and you'll have boring workplaces. So constantly iterate and evolve and push the envelope. If you're coming into the industry, don't be afraid to try something new and get yourself a good mentor.
Yeah. And as my dad said to me when I was a kid, shy Bairns get nows.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
exactly.
Put yourself out there.
Exactly. Just don't be afraid to come in with a different perspective.
Yeah.
Because I feel the facilities management industry, I go to all these networking events and just a bunch of old guys with grey hair. It needs shaking up a little bit. So the next generation of workplace and facilities people coming in, push the envelope, change the boundaries, do something different, be more dynamic. I think that's what employees want their workspaces to be. So don't be afraid to push it.
Yeah. See, I was dynamic 20 years ago, but just kept getting in trouble. I was before my time.
There's more tolerance now.
I was before my time, Mark. I was before my time. Okay, brilliant. So, what's the one thing that you're proud of? What's your greatest achievement in your career? What are you proud of? What's the one thing where you think I'm well happy with that? I did well.
Oh gosh. Can I be cheeky and have two answers?
Yeah, of course you can.
I think that there's some of the projects are the ones you look back on because they were such a big reaction to it. Yeah. So one quite recently at my time at Adobe, we had 5 offices in Paris spread all over the city. And if anybody's worked in Paris, the 8th to the 16th is a very different atmosphere and different environment. So trying to consolidate everybody in it was a 2-year project of change management, working with the French Workers' Councils, understanding where employees...
I bet that was hard, actually, because that's very difficult over there, isn't it?
It was unbelievably challenging, like more complex than anything I thought. So any sort of real estate project is pretty traditional. You have to find the building, you work with an architect to have a nice design, get that agreed, then find a contractor, you build it, everybody's happy. But this one, there's probably about a year to 18 months worth of work ahead of that before we could even get there, getting people on board and buying in. And ultimately, at the end of the project, we ended up with a fantastic building that was views of the Eiffel Tower, roof terrace, champagne bars, and like a workplace that anybody would be proud of. And the hours of hard work that we put in to just get to picking a building was stuff that wouldn't be seen by many. So that one kind of stands out for me in sort of every 2 weeks being in Paris, sitting with a meet like face to face, taking all the questions on, taking all the flack from the employees, dealing with that kind of, I think, was a great personal achievement for the perseverance to getting there. And the end result was phenomenal. If you Google Adobe's office in Paris, you'll see the standard that build was fantastic.
Yeah.
And then some of the stuff at Facebook kind of growing from small offices in Covent Garden to some of these really unique, working with the likes of Frank Gehry as an architect was like bucket list thing for me as a building geek. One of the most famous architects in the world. He's been on The Simpsons. That's how famous he is.
Really?
So if you don't know Frank Gehry, look him up, the Guggenheim Museum. Fantastic projects. Experiences I'll never forget. But for me, on the other side of it is seeing some of the team that I've hired develop into managers of their own and really go on to excel in their own spaces, kind of seeing something in somebody, cultivating it, or just adding a little bit of help in their direction. I'm not taking any credit for what they've done in their careers, but kind of seeing it is like one of those proud dad moments. Honestly, I keep in touch with a lot of teams that I've worked with in the past, and seeing how they're doing now is just like, prouder of that than I am of some of the building stuff. You can point and say I've worked on that project, but looking at what people are doing now and seeing them sort of grow into fantastic professionals is like, heartwarming.
Yeah. Okay, and sort of conversely, any regrets, things that you would have done differently?
Oh, loads. Too many to mention. I think that I think, yeah, loads of regrets, but I don't look at the failures as a bad thing. I look at them as learning opportunities.
Yeah,
So
fair comment.
there's so many times when we've tried to push forward with stuff, we've spent company money, it didn't work out. So yes, it's a failure, but what did we learn from it? How do we stop colleagues doing that in other areas? So it's how you pivot the mistake into a learning opportunity, I find. But yeah, for me, some of the stuff is I'm quite direct. So look back at some of those meetings with contractors and wince sometimes the way I'm behaving around a table. It's
really?
It's not great. It's not. It's something that I need to develop still as a professional. And sometimes as well, I don't know, subject matter expert in some of these spaces, like not allowing my team to take the lead on stuff and jumping in and solving problems for them. It's something that me personally, I'm still continuing to work on. So it's like I catch myself sometimes on calls jumping in and fixing everybody's problems, and I have to let them find their own solutions sometimes and allow them to make those mistakes, which I've done plenty of in my career to develop. So it's they're the kind of ones for me. But like I say, if you do make a mistake, as long as you learn from it, it's not a mistake.
That's true. Yeah,
it's honestly just part of becoming a better facilities manager.
True. Very true. Very true.
Yeah, as long as you've got a forgiving boss and you don't make too many of them.
Yeah, you don't want to make
if
too
you're doing
much.
it every week, then you might not be there very long. But yeah, as long as you're learning from them and can rationale why you made the decision, if you're sound about the outcome was supposed to be better, or here's what we was hoping to see from it, if you can document why you come to that conclusion, you're okay. But yeah, for me, sometimes it can just be I set myself really high standards. So if the team around me are not doing it, I can be too direct sometimes. But like I say, learning as I go. Nobody's perfect.
I'm a firm believer in hard work, and I think I'm very much the same. Actually, to be fair, I think if a job's worth doing, it's worth doing right. I think if you lead from the front, people should do the same thing, follow to a certain extent. So I can understand why that could be quite frustrating.
Yeah. And for me, I mean, honestly, working internationally has really changed the way that I look at things. Certain individuals, certain cultures respond differently to different management styles. So it can't always be carrot and stick. Sometimes it has to be a little bit of both in the same meeting. So how do you adapt and wear many hats? Sort of nice pun there. Yeah. To develop sort of different international teams, it's really interesting. And like I say, I'm learning every day. I learn from my team so much, especially the younger ones in my team. It kind of keep me relevant still. It's like, what do they need out of workspace? What do they need out of
That's why I work with Ethan. It's keeping me young. It's keeping me young.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that, don't ever feel like if you get to a certain level in your career that you're beyond coaching or developing.
Yeah,
everybody can improve. So
how many direct reports do you have at the minute, Mark?
So my team is 22 across the globe. Yeah. I have 2 managers that kind of split the globe in half that have the bulk of the team underneath them. Right. So sort of 2 direct reports, but underneath them 20 or so people without having the contractor staff on top. So spread globally. So that's 22 spread pretty thin. I recently done a presentation where I had to present sort of what my team are working on, and I described them as a team of plate spinners. They're constantly sort of keeping this one balancing over here, and just as they stable that one, another problem erupts over there. So we're constantly juggling and moving around. There's never a plateau where it's nice and calm in my team. There's constantly stuff going on. So
very good. Okay, so tell us a little bit about you. What outside of work, what do you enjoy? How do you relax? What do you like to do?
I'm a family man, so I had 2 young kids, a 12-year-old and a 9-year-old. So when I'm not at work, I'm dad only. I try my best not to talk about work at home. I honestly try my best to switch off, especially now working from home a lot. So I don't bore my wife with all the stuff that I'm going through, especially with the kids. But
my wife still doesn't know what I do.
Well, that's the best thing.
I ask her and she's like, "Well, you're in sales. What do I do?"
But I think that's the best thing, to kind of separate that that home and work life separation. You don't want it bleeding into eating into the family time for me.
Yeah.
So yeah, at home full time with the kids, and then I was a lockdown golfer.
Well, oh, really?
I'm now like massively into my golf. If I can get out and play, I will do. And I find I traveled an awful lot for my previous work, sort of constantly on flights and in hotels on my own. So I had so much like thinking time, I would call it. Sort of, I would almost challenge myself on a flight. If there was a particular strategic issue that I had, I would sit on a 4-hour flight and say, okay, 4 hours I'm dedicating to this scenario, and I have pros and cons stuff on a plane. I don't get as much as that anymore unless I'm on the golf course where it's 4 hours again of a round of 18 holes. I can actually decompartmentalize and find the space without somebody asking me a question, or the kids need me to do something, or have to join this call, or there's emails. That's kind of my space where I can have that freedom to think. And I think it's crucially important for me. I overanalyze and overthink a lot of stuff, so I need the brain space to do it. And I found during lockdown golf enabled that, so I've continued that on. So yeah, that's my...
I do something similar, but rather than golf, it's fishing.
Yeah.
Fishing I find gives me time to think and just chill out. But to be quite frank, it gives me the opportunity to think of nothing, which I think men are brilliant at.
Yeah.
You know,
but
like, I am really good at that. I can sit in front of a reservoir for 4 hours and think about nothing.
But I think thinking about nothing is underrated.
Yeah.
People talk about mental health an awful lot now, which is great that it's in the conversation, especially amongst men, right? I think that there was this stigma attached to men not talking about, but having the time to think about nothing is almost impossible. If you full-time work or you have a busy family life at home as well, when do you get that space to think about nothing?
Yeah.
So if you can carve out those moments to go for a walk, go for a jog, whatever it is where you're alone with your thoughts, and if you can think about nothing, that's fantastic. If you've got nothing consuming your mind all the time, so if you could get to that space, do it.
I don't know. I do take me boy, and occasionally he'll just rock up with some stupid question.
Yeah, my son.
That makes me. You know when you just sat there, you turn around the equals when you go, what?
My son, my wife says he shares my thirst for knowledge. He's got a question about everything.
My boy's the same, yeah.
Yep.
Crackers.
Yeah.
It's quite interesting. Okay, Mark, that's the end of the podcast. How did you find it?
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Good chat.
Yeah, I found it really, really interesting. I think, your insights are, fantastic. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah. All right, Wear Many Hats listeners. That's another episode in the can. One of the really interesting ones so far. Great to speak to somebody that's, been part of that tech revolution, as I call it, within the workspace. Really interesting hearing Mark's insights about how the workplace may alter over the next 5 years. So thanks a lot, guys. Take care. See you on the next episode.